Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching this. My name is Guanxi Kalsamisho, and this is the Restoration Economics channel. If you like what I have to say, please click the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel. So this is my second video that I'm doing, and I wanted to talk today about the trade war that's going on, rare earth elements, the notion of Guanxi in Chinese culture, and your iPhone or your MRI or your car. Because all of these things are, in a global world, are interconnected. I have a little bit of a cough. I'm not going to try and edit this out. I'm just going to talk through and do the best I can. So, what are rare earth elements? Why is it important that China has stopped exporting these elements to the United States, or allowing, the United States to access these elements? What does that have to do with the culture clash that's happening, on a global scale? And how is that going to affect you personally into the future? So let's get into it. I wanted to start by sharing a picture of the periodic table of elements. So we're going to go back to high school chemistry. We know that the universe is made up of many different kinds of elements, and the key to defining the different elements is how many protons there are in the nucleus, and the protons are the positively charged particles that attract electrons, which are negatively charged. And I'm sure physics has evolved since I was in high school. So if you want to explain this more, please leave a comment. If you have a physics background and want to talk more about this, you're welcome to comment. But the key is that some elements are more abundant than others. Others are less abundant than others. But when we talk about rare earth elements, we're not really talking about the abundance of the elements per se. We're talking about how easy it is to find them on the earth in quantities that are large enough to make it economical to mine these elements. Okay, so some things like coal, lots of coal, you can mine coal, get a lot of it. Other things like diamonds or emeralds, you kind of really got to dig through. Diamonds are really just super hyper pressurized coal, and you've really got to kind of dig through to find a diamond vein or a place in a mountain where the coal is pressurized enough to form a diamond. So these particular elements are not very abundant in very many places. That's what makes them rare. The other thing that makes them rare is they're very difficult to refine. There's a huge environmental cost. There's a lot of very toxic processes that are involved in extracting these minerals, from the earth, from rock, from, wherever they're found. And these elements, which I'm going to list in a moment, but you can see them. I've circled them on this periodic table of elements. So I want to, kind of point you to, I'm going to let me just kind of switch my screen a little bit. Gallium, germanium, molybdenum, which I'm not going to pronounce properly, indium, tellurium, tungsten, bismuth, scandium, yttrium, samarium, gadolinium, terbium. These are not the normal elements that we hear talking about. But when we look at their proton numbers, and let me find this again. When we look at their proton numbers, what we discover, there we go. What we discover is that these, the periodic table of elements is organized in a certain way. So you'll see these columns, and it means that these elements have similar qualities to each other. And this column 3, which starts with scandium and yttrium, there's a little block that says 57 through 71, and it's got a light green color. So here's all the elements that have the proton numbers 57 through 71. And these all have similar qualities to each other. So they're elements that behave in similar ways to each other. They're organized in a column, on the periodic table. You can see some of the other ones I've circled below, but if the periodic table was, listed lengthwise, all of these light green elements would be under the yttrium. So these are elements that behave similarly. And over time, industrialists have figured out ways to use these elements in a variety of modern applications. You can say that our modern life, all our modern conveniences, so many things we love, are based on the discovery, the refining, and the use of many of these rare elements. So let's look at a little bit about the elements in terms of when China decided to put export restrictions on them and kind of what they do. I'm not going to read this entire spreadsheet, but it'll give you an idea. So in December of last year, 2024, gallium and germanium were put on China's restricted list. And these are used in things like semiconductors, fiber optics, solar cells, LEDs, lasers, medical applications. Many modern electronics need gallium. If we go down to, there was an additional group of elements that were restricted in February of 2025. So, and again, these are elements that are used in the construction of automobiles. They're used in the semiconductor industry. They're used for solar panels. They're used for alloy metals, magnets, missiles, bullets. So you can see how these elements are used in these critical, we live through electronics these days. We rely on our cars to get around, or, buses to get around, or things that require certain kinds of metals to be made to take us from one place to the other. When there's a race on for, renewable energy, for space exploration. And when we go into April, there's another list of elements that are then kind of restricted from China. And these again are related to magnets, to LEDs, to MRI machines, stabilizers for fuel cells, fluorescent lamps, things used in petroleum refineries to make. So all of these processes that kind of our life depends on, that the future is geared towards, they all rely upon these rare earth elements to make them work. So why does China have so much leverage in this moment? Well, it's not just that the majority of mining for rare earth elements has taken place in China over these last decades, right? So we talked about in our first video, Breaking Globalization, how industry left the United States, went to China, and developed manufacturing processes there, produced products like the iPhone. It's the easiest example, that then got sold back to the United States. So one of the reasons they did this was because China had much more lax environmental regulations or environmental restrictions. So the mining facilities and the transportation of the rare earth elements to the factories in China that US companies were invested in with the Chinese government, it was a lot more convenient. So there was this convenience developed where the mining could happen in China. These are very toxic mining processes. Remember, China does not have a democracy. There's no way for a community to organize a town hall and get someone elected to protest that there's a toxic dump opening up next to their village. It doesn't work that way. So they're toxic environmental processes. There wasn't going to be any outcry about, or at least not in a public way that was going to challenge the government very deeply in terms of their plans, to mine the elements. The other thing is that China has the only capacity right now, or virtually the only capacity right now, to refine the elements. So mining them is one part, which is, its own set of troubles. And then refining the elements so that they can be used to make things is the next piece. And right now, almost all of the capacity to refine these rare earth elements is in China. So when it comes to all of these things that we depend upon or that we've gotten used to, the conveniences, our modern electronic way of life, these rare earth elements are found in other places outside of China, but China has been the primary place to develop the mining and the refining of the elements that then US companies have used in manufacturing, not just US, but other companies as well, use in manufacturing products that then get sold, around the world. Okay, so President Trump started a trade war with China. China is not going to back down. They're going to fight back. They're going to find their way to, they're going to find their own road forward, but they're not going to do anything to position themselves to be subservient to the U.S. And there are certain leverage points they have, and one of those leverage points are these rare earth elements. So this is where I want to talk about the idea of Guanxi a little bit in Chinese culture, and Guanxi, I believe it's pronounced properly with the tones, because again, we're in a global world, a global economy. We're all linked to each other in ways we don't understand, but we have very deeply different cultural perspectives coming to the table. So in the United States, you own things, or you don't own things. You rent, or you own. You buy a car, you borrow money for it, you pay it off, it's yours. You buy a house, you have the mortgage, you're making the mortgage payment, it's yours. You're renting a place, okay, it's not yours, but at least you can decide what to do with that space within certain laws. And a big part of our legal system is about protecting property rights. Some of it is about protecting people, but it's also based on the idea of property and protecting property rights. So if I own something, I have certain rights that come with it. I also have certain duties that come with it in terms of taxes or following local law or local regulation or federal law and federal regulation. But there's no question that I own it. So if I own a piece of land and there's something important there and you want what I have on my land, you come to me, we talk about it, we make a deal, and I give you permission to do something on my land. And it's pretty clear cut. I mean, there's of course all kinds of legal games people played over the years. We all remember those old Western movies about the poor grandma who was, sitting on some gold and didn't realize it, and kind of got talked out of selling her property, or at a pittance. So it's not that there aren't games that go on, but the basic idea is I own, and once I own, you have to negotiate with me. China does not have that same concept of private ownership. Now, we talk about China as being a communist country, but what we have to understand is that China has been around as a civilization for 5,000 years. And it's not so much that they're communist, it's that they're central government controlled, and they always have been. The different emperors under the different dynasties was all about central government control. And so when you have a central government, and in imperial times it was, kind of a divine king. In these days it's about, the Communist Party that sees everything within its domain as centrally owned, centrally controlled. There isn't the same idea as private property anymore. Instead, property or rights or how can I say it? Opportunities are held in very sophisticated networks of relationships, which is what's known as Guanxi. Okay, that it's not a person who holds something. It's this ever shifting network of relationships where people kind of prove that they can be good stewards based on the values of the ruling government, the central government, or the emperor, or whomever. And if they are good stewards, they can become responsible for something, again, in these networks of relationships that are always dynamic and changing. And, but you can be put in, you can be taken out. There's no such thing as anybody owning anything, except Beijing kind of owns everything. Or, a group of, people in Shanghai, or, it's not personal, it's not private, it's not defendable in a court of law. It's only by the network of relationships that change, which then hold a piece of land, or mining rights or fishing rights or whatever, and you're getting that permission from that shifting network, not from a person who owns something. Now, again, this is very simplistic. Other people who've done business in China for decades may want to correct some of my ideas here, or add to them, but I just want to give an overview. So what happens when China makes this kind of move to say, well, these resources centrally owned by the government, which your industry depends upon, because you've picked a trade war with us, you started a trade war with us, we're going to withhold these rare earth elements. There isn't a single pressure point for the United States to go to get that to change. There are different officers already. I won't talk about this today, but already some moves were made in leadership about who would be responsible for negotiating. But it's not a simple process to get those minerals flowing again, and partly because in relationships in Guanxi, you have to care about how the other person looks. The notion of face, is like, is the other person being respected? Is the other person being honored? Are you insulting that other person? Are you making them look bad? These all have tremendous influence on the willingness of that network to negotiate with you, on the willingness of those group of people to let you in and let you have access. So it's not just that President Trump has started a trade war with China. It's also that there's been a lot of insulting of the Chinese along the way. And for this to get back on track is going to be, there's going to be more complexity to it. It's not just going to be about, well, who do we call and make a deal with? That's not the way it works. It's going to be, how do you restore face? How do you apologize for that insult? How do you reestablish the relationship so there's a willingness again to let you in and let you have access to these things that China is completely dominant in this time and space, on, with these rare earth elements. So Guanxi, understanding Guanxi is very important to understanding this moment and what things might or might not, or could not move forward with China. And so restoring the relationships is key. Now, what we're watching the US government do is pivot. They're not really attempting to restore relationships. That's not how this government works. The Trump administration, in their rush to break globalization, they're demonstrating an incredible stupidity and insensitivity about how other cultures work, and about our need as the United States to be culturally literate. It doesn't mean that you adopt the values of other cultures, but you at least need to have the literacy to know how to navigate it. So what they're doing is they're looking for another solution. Some of the moves they've made is, this minerals deal in Ukraine. Okay, well, we're gonna leave China alone, and we're gonna go find minerals in Ukraine, and we're gonna mine minerals in Ukraine, and we're gonna refine minerals from Ukraine and use that for our manufacturing. Well, this is going to take years to do. The war has to stop before anyone is going to even think about spending one dime to build a manufacturing center in Ukraine. That's why President Trump is so eager to get Putin to sign a peace deal, because as soon as the fighting stops, U.S. interests can move in and start building mining facilities and factories to do what they can no longer do in China: mine the rare earth minerals, refine them, use them for manufacturing. And Ukraine is still trying to become a democracy. Like, we should be supporting them to become a democracy. And if they do become a democracy, then they will have the right to complain if the mining process is toxic. They'll have the right to elect leaders to put guardrails around this kind of, desperation for the next source of rare earth minerals. So while it's a gambit that President Trump is doing, can we get these minerals from Ukraine? He's going to have to stop a war and ensure a long-lasting peace, because before anyone's going to spend a dime to build the kind of complex facilities to mine those elements and refine those elements. Okay, that's Ukraine. President Trump recently signed an executive order to open up deep sea mining. Well, the deep oceans have been off limits for mining and other industrial uses because we're in a frickin' climate crisis. Don't mess with the part of the ocean that we haven't studied, we haven't mapped, we haven't understood, that has species that we probably don't even know about. Leave the deep earth alone. Well, President Trump has just recently signed an executive order to try and open up deep sea mining for the same reasons, to see if they can find these minerals, to get another source for the minerals that then they're going to need to refine somewhere. And Greenland, again, the whole gambit around Greenland, it has a lot to do with having rare earth mining and refining happening in close proximity. So if you get Greenland and you start mining there and refining there, and you start opening factories in the United States, and you start producing from the United States, then again, it draws that manufacturing power somewhat away from China back into the West. All these things are processes that are going to take years and billions of dollars of investment. Okay, maybe millions of dollars, but I'm going to say billions of dollars of investment. And all of them are requiring really, really challenging political moves that, whether or not they're going to have democratic support or the support of allies or long-term support, is also a question. Where does this mean for you? Well, it means iPhones might get more expensive, MRIs might get more expensive, cars will get more expensive. Everything that these rare earth elements create, at a minimum, are going to become more expensive because of the blockade and China not allowing the elements to come through. Or there could conceivably be a time where we're not making as many of them because the rare earth elements aren't there. I can't say anything more than that, because this is in such flux at the moment. This is in play at the moment. But I will say that replacing the industrial capacity that China has is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be cheap, and it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be fraught with political complexity. So yeah, maybe your phone gets a lot more expensive. Maybe companies have to wait before they make the next, iteration or the next upgrade. Renewable energy and the space race, also big future industries, also reliant on rare earth elements. People who control the rare earth elements control the destiny of some of these kind of third millennium industries that are starting to be born right now. So why am I sharing all this with you? Because the news that we consume today is mythological, it is sound bites, it is emotional, and it doesn't provide context or really outline the complexity of the things that we're dealing with. And so my hope is that one of the things I can do with this channel is talk about those things that I have an interest in, that I have some level of experience with, to create context, to describe complexity, to help you be a better decision maker. Okay? China is not the enemy. We have made them a friend for decades. They have provided these elements for decades. And if the citizens of the United States or people in other countries want to break away from that dependence on China, it's worthwhile to do it in a way that is respectful of them, because replacing this capacity will take years. And it would be better to sort of slowly wean off in a respectful way and build capacity in a respectful way over time, rather than this insulting, belligerent, bullying, we don't need you attitude that then leads to, you know, economic crisis, potentially production crisis, and radical swings in political alliances. So that's my opinion. Those last few minutes, you may disagree with me, and or you may agree with me, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So again, this is my second video. I'm just learning how to do this. If you enjoyed this video, it was interesting for you, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and if you have some area of expertise or just some opinions or something you've heard or you've seen, would love to hear your comments in the comment section of the video. Okay, thanks again, and have a great day, and look forward to talking to you again soon.